Hi, I'm Sami. That's Rick and Dimitri. We're all really excited to welcome you to sunny San Francisco for BlinkOn 5. And it's really nice to see a big room full of friends of Blink, all 217 of you. That I think it's our biggest turnout yet, which is really, really exciting. And there's a nice spread of attendance from companies this time around as well, so really nice upward trend. As per tradition, I thought we could start with look back to the past 6 months of all the amazing stuff that we've done in the project. And on a high level, basically, we sent out 166 intents. That's almost 20% more than last time around, so also a nice upward trajectory there. These intents ended up translating into more than 7,000 commits, which is almost like 40,000 lines of code from over 400 contributors. These numbers are actually pretty similar to before, but there is one area where we have seen a clear change in trend, which is number of bugs. So if you remember, at the beginning of the quarter, we set ourselves a goal that we should triage newly opened bugs within a week of them getting opened. And I think you can see the result of that in these graphs. So basically on the left, yeah, great. On the left, you can see the volume of incoming bugs is pretty much the same as before, but the magic happens in the middle. We fixed almost 20% more bugs than previously, and for the first time ever, the number of open bugs has gone down. So that's a really good thing to see. It's also interesting to look at these numbers split out by different teams and areas. And it's pretty clear that from this picture that some of the teams have done a pretty heroic effort working down the number of bugs they have. And not just like dealing with the incoming flow, but actually going above and shrinking the overall number of bugs in their area. So really, really good achievement. So I think these kind of numbers and trends are really showing that our project organization and we're doing something right with the setup that we have. Like if you compare back to a year ago, we actually now have teams that have plans and goals, and it's starting to look like almost like a serious engineering project, which is really great to see. And like we actually have like both really narrowly focused like teams working on different subsystems, as well as teams focused on cross-functional things like performance and memory. So that is really nice. So you might be asking yourself, so sure, Sami, these numbers look really nice, but what do they mean in practice? What did we actually accomplish concretely? Well, turns out a whole lot of stuff. And unfortunately, they only gave us 45 minutes, so I can't talk about each and everything we did. So I'll just share some randomly chosen highlights just to give you a taste of what we did. For example, slimming paint is a huge refactoring or reimagining of the way painting is done in Blink. Slimming paint landed the phase 1 of their rewrite recently, which introduces basically this new display list object into Blink and paves the way for further optimization and improvements. A really nice accomplishment. Another big project, oil pan garbage collector. The team has made a huge performance leap over the past 6 months. Can't really read the labels here, but basically you want these bars to go up instead of down. And most of them are going up now, so oil pan is actually a net performance win, which is really impressive, and we're really close to shipping it. Then on a higher level type of feature, a media session gives Blink some new media capabilities, like you can react to someone pressing the pause or play button on your headset, for instance. And this feature is actually a really good example of a joint project between Opera and Google implementing it together. So really nice to see that coming together. CSS multi-column. You might know that this feature has actually existed for a while now, but the problem was that wasn't really nicely integrated with the rest of layout code in Blink. It was kind of a pain to work with, but what we've done now is actually rewrote it completely and designed it in a good way, so now it fits really nicely and will let us do further improvements. Another feature that you might not actually realize that you want before you see it in action, splash screen. Basically, you can kind of tell from the animation that when you launch the web app, you see this nice loading screen instead of a blank flash or whatever we had before. It's really a good example of like product excellence type of polish that we're doing more and more. Happy to see that. Then at somewhat lower level in the stack, V8 has made great progress in adding new ES6 functionality. This is just a partial list of some of these things they've added, and more stuff is coming. Also, something from V8 in collaboration with the scheduling folks, something called idle time garbage collection, which basically lets us do garbage collection in otherwise unused time. The advantage there is that you don't need to do garbage collection when you're doing something more important, like drawing an animation. So you can kind of see in the animation example here that the left one is kind of jittery because garbage collection is happening at random times, but this one is much smoother. And turns out this same feature has another big benefit, which is reducing the overall memory usage. Like in this example, Gmail is using 30% less memory because we can collect more garbage during like idle time. It's really good. In a similar vein, we've added a new API called request idle callback, which lets web pages kind of do similar kind of idle type work without stepping on the toes of the browser and introducing jank to more important things. And another cool optimization from Intel. Turns out a lot of the time spent in the browser is actually moving around these texture bitmaps between the CPU and the GPU, and that ends up taking a lot of time. So what they've done here is actually using like a single shared memory between CPU and GPU that you don't have to move around, and that ends up being a lot cheaper, especially on really high resolution screens. Nice work. And last but not least, you might sort of guess what this picture represents. The best part of the Blink repository merge, I think, was that it was so transparent to most of us, like went off without a hitch. And that was only because the team behind it spent like more than a year preparing. So really nice impact. Right, so that was just really a random selection of cool things we did. Similarly, there's a huge amount of things that are currently in progress, so I thought I'd mention at least a few of them. First off, I hope most people, or a lot of people here, have seen something like this. This is the trace viewer profiling tool that we all know and love. So we're making tracing better in a bunch of ways. And the first one is integrating tracing with Rail. And remember, Rail is this performance framework that we use to reason about performance in different use cases like animations and touch response. And the idea here is that we can annotate a trace automatically telling which letter of the rail you are in each point in time, basically, and that lets you sort of evaluate how good the user experience was. And you had to do this kind of thing manually before, now it's automated. And once you have that, the next obvious step is to scale it up and do it across a bunch of traces. And the idea here is that we get a bunch of traces from the field, like from users with their permission, of course, and then run sort of a MapReduce operation on them that extracts interesting features from those traces. And once you have a system like this, you can start asking really interesting questions like, give me all these examples of where layout took like 100 milliseconds, right, when you were trying to scroll the screen and cause the jank. And then you can sort of dive into these kind of scenarios and maybe learn something. So we're calling this system Performance Insights, and I won't spoil it any further because I think there's at least 2 talks about that this week. Another tracing-related innovation is adding more really fine-grained memory information, like memory allocation information. You might have known that previously memory use in Blink was really like a black box. Nobody had no idea what was going on. So this kind of stuff is really welcome addition. And there's also a talk about this tomorrow, so go and see that. And one more thing we're sort of experimenting with this is giving developers the option of using like latest and greatest web technologies for automated testing. And we're calling this project Headless Chrome, so Chrome without a display. And the idea, you can use it for in your testing workflow, like compatibility, performance, or basically pre-submit checks. And you can do this sort of stuff with Chrome already, but there's a lot of overhead in running a full browser, like actually having a screen and everything. So we're hoping this project will let you do these kind of things at a bigger scale. So, right, this was just a really brief glimpse of stuff that's in the pipeline and stuff we're working on. There's a whole bunch of stuff happening. Go see all the talks this week, and it's really amazing to see the progress that we're making as a team.
All right, thanks, Sami. Test. Is this one on? Test. Okay. So we know that's all super exciting. We're working on important stuff. We know that. But let's take a minute to take a step back and think about the big picture. As we're planning what we're going to be working on, we want to look at it more holistically. What does it mean, what we've been doing? Why is it important? So if you remember at BlinkOn 2, for those of you that were there, we discussed the mobile web emergency. And since then, we've been working hard at trying to improve the situation. But there's been a pretty steady stream of bad news for the mobile web. We've seen, for example, Flipkart, which is the biggest online reseller in India, completely leave the mobile web and plan to shut down their website completely in favor of native apps. But if you fast forward to today, developers are starting to remember what's great about the web. The web has some properties that they weren't getting with the native app strategy. And people are starting to come back to the web platform, remembering why it's awesome. So for those of you who didn't see the news yesterday, Flipkart announced they're relaunching their website. And they see a service worker as really changing the landscape for their choice of platforms, especially in emerging markets. If you haven't tried it yet, Flipkart on Chrome or Opera is just awesome. It feels like a native app. It's great. In particular, I love this middle quote. Mobile engineering team at Flipkart discovered that with the right set of capabilities in a browser, a mobile web app can be as performant as a native app. I don't know that I quite believe that yet. I know what goes on inside of Blink. But the fact that people are noticing this and saying this feels like native app. For example, Atavist attempted to go native mobile, and they've given up on that. They say, lots of people have tried, but few can succeed in being one of the top 25 apps on your home screen that people are going to launch all the time. And the low friction of the web platform really wins here and really provides an opportunity for a much greater diversity of content and applications. For example, Facebook, who also famously down-prioritized their web investments, said that still today, they've got more than 100 million users that use a browser on Android as their primary way of accessing Facebook. And so they have to go to where their users are. The users prefer that. It's lower friction. And recently, they've rolled out push notifications to all those users. And it's having a big impact. We're seeing substantial adoption of push notifications around the world by a variety of sites. For example, Beyond the Rack did this study where they found they're like an online retailing store. They found that over half their users were already visiting via the mobile web, not just the web, from a mobile device. And within 3 months of launching push notifications, their repeat visits went up 50%. And the users that came back via push notifications spent 26% more than average than people that arrived there through other means. So push notifications are making a real difference for people building businesses on the web. But it's important to remember that our mission isn't just to make Blink awesome. right? Our mission is to make the web awesome, and Blink is just a tool as part of doing that. And this isn't altruism. None of this, as far as I know, nobody here, except maybe one Mozilla person, works for a charity. Right? We're all lucky enough to work for organizations that know that it's in our long-term best interest to have an open, healthy web platform that's not controlled by one or even a small number of companies. And it's really easy to forget about this as we got caught up shipping our features that we're excited about. Am I still good? Test, test. OK. As we get caught up in shipping the features that we're excited about, it's really easy to forget that our goal isn't just to ship an awesome browser or awesome browsers, Chrome and Opera, and other browsers built on top of Blink. Right? Our goal is to really push the web forward. So we've talked about some of the powerful properties of the web. Definitely composition and enabling really low revenue business models. That's really exciting. That's good. But taken together at scale, these properties can sometimes be a little toxic. And they lead directly to the kind of performance problems of scale that we're seeing. Misaligned incentives and, for example, The Verge, which is like a content site, right? Like you want to, they publish articles. It has twice as much JavaScript in terms of bytes as it does HTML. And when we do a perf audit, we find that there's a whole lot of third-party scripts running on page load, eating up a bunch of load time, memory usage, battery, network usage, et cetera. And this is a problem. We need to do something about it. And our failure to really do something meaningful about this has led users to take this problem into their own hands and just say, just block all the third-party stuff, because it gives them a better experience. But if we're not really thoughtful about this, if we don't take this seriously and think about it holistically, then it could cause a lot of harm to the platform, right? I don't think any of us wants to see the web lose its source of monetization. One of the problems, I think, is that there's a real lack of performance feedback channels. So for example, search engines direct users to sites, but they know very little about the performance of those sites. So they're not able to really make the best decision all the time for the users. And then the publishers choose what third-party frameworks, analytics, other libraries that they're going to use. But their visibility into how those libraries impact their real performance in the wild is limited. And of course, all of this is running inside of a browser on the user's machine. And we don't do a great job of feeding back to the developers and helping them really understand how their code is behaving in the wild and how the decisions they're making are affecting what their user experience is and then ultimately their bottom line. I mean, we know it's damn hard for us to understand how Blink is performing in the wild. How's like the average web developer supposed to reason about that? But we know that there are sites that are rich and provide a fast user experience. I love like the new Google Maps mobile website or Facebook or Google Photos. They provide a really app-like, rich experience that feels really snappy and responsive. The new Flipkart. But we need to make this the norm. Problem is, it's hard, especially if you want to actually have a viable business. It ends up being that it takes a lot of money, right? It takes a lot of work to make that work well. What we need is more of a bit of success here, where the simple things tend to be great, and that people without a huge amount of work can build something that's rich and fast. And the real question for us is, how do we tweak the ecosystem? How do we change the incentives and tweak the platform so that developers can deliver better user experiences without risking damaging the economics of the ecosystem? And there's no easy solution to any of this, but we need to approach it as the complex, multifaceted problem it is, and experiment and try a bunch of ideas and be thoughtful about it. But there's some good news here. To me, this is overwhelming. Like already, this one problem of performance, like, I don't, how the heck are we going to do this? The good news is we're just one part of a huge ecosystem. And we've got great relationships with some really important players. Right? For example, there's companies, application performance management companies, whose whole reason for existence is to help people make their sites perform better. Right? They're just dying for us to give them little bits of more information. And then the impact we can have can be magnified several thousand-fold by them going out and then working with their customers and helping them make their sites better. And we're also just one vendor. And we've got good relationship, good partnership with all the other major browser vendors. And our interests are aligned. It's surprising when you really spend time talking with other browser vendors, like, for the most part, we all want these same things, which is, So although performance is probably our biggest hard problem, It's just one of a number of important challenges that we have to work on. So for example, for developers to invest in the web, they need to know that we browser vendors have got their back. And sometimes we hurt that confidence. So for example, Artillery was a web-based game that we used to hold up as a shining example of, yes, you can build games on the web. But they had a lot of problems, and they filed bugs on us. And some of those bugs, honestly, we didn't notice. They sat there for a long time. My team, bugs that I should have noticed on my team. And they had feature requests that just were too low priority for us. I mean, those are kind of two different things. But we need developers to feel like when they find important problems, especially regressions, that we're going to take it seriously. And that their stuff's not just going to keep breaking, right? They're making a bet on the platform, and they're making a bet on each of the individual browsers that their stuff is going to continue to provide a high-quality user experience for their users. We also have a lot of tough trade-offs that we have to try to figure out how to juggle. For example, performance and predictability is a tough one, right? We're doing all sorts of cool things now to improve the performance of the web today. Sami and the scheduler team have been doing some awesome things. But it's not always clear how to strike this balance properly. So for example, recently we shipped a optimization so that while input's occurring, we want to down prioritize loading. Because normally, the page is still loading a bunch of images that aren't on screen yet, or causing your scroll to jank, that sort of thing. So for most sites, that makes perfect sense. And then the developer of a server-rendered 3D engine that is actually sending back images on every mouse move comes to us and complains his app is completely broken. So some of these things that feel like they seem to make sense in practice, and even when they work well for 95% of the content, if it makes it hard for even 5% of developers to understand and predict how their app's going to behave and just completely breaks them, that might not be the right trade-off. Interoperability is also incredibly important, right? Developers care about the web platform as a whole, and they want to be able to write something that works consistently across multiple browsers. But we also want to be pushing the web forward as fast as we can. And there's a tough line to walk there. And we're not going to get it perfect, but we've got to be thoughtful about it and do our best. It's also, especially around performance, we really want to do better at understanding what the behavior is in the real world, what users are experiencing in practice. But we also want to be incredibly thoughtful about privacy. So for example, we're never going to have Chrome send back the URLs that people are going to. We don't want to know what URLs people are visiting, because that's a privacy invasion. But we still want to be able to make the sites they're visiting fast. So it's a tough trade-off. We also have a lot left to do still in increasing richness. Yes, we've made a lot of progress over the last year with things like push notifications and service worker and add to home screen and the media controls, all those things. But there's still a lot of capabilities that users expect, especially on their mobile devices, that they can't yet get from the web. We need to close that gap. And it's also not clear there's a lot of things we could be doing that might enable new business models. So for example, what kind of new input devices would be built if we had web Bluetooth or web USB? How much have we slowed down new devices? Or are there new approaches to payments, for example, that would be enabled via the web if we just had enough richness in the platform that people could go build this stuff without having to be blocked on the whole standards process and all browser vendors shipping something new?
So with all these challenges, what are we going to do, right? It's not like, what are we going to do? More like, let's do something, right? And we have all these amazing things happening. I don't know if everybody feels the same thing in this room, but I feel like we are on the verge of something really great happening with the web. And I keep telling folks, just don't screw it up in 2016. Let's keep the momentum going. Don't screw this up. And so, booming voice, that's always the best thing, right? So a couple of things that we've learned last year that are really important and I think really critical. If you define your success metrics in terms of user experience, things work. And it's very hard for us engineers to approach really vague terms like, is this site fast, right? Or is it pleasant? Or is the user happy? Without having some sort of metrics. And so one of the things that we built over this year is this whole Rail framework. And it's worked really well. I mean, there's several people who can stand up right now on the team and say, yes, this really helped me understand this. But we're still not there. There's still a lot of work, as Sami outlined, that is still happening. with performance insights is trying to get more sense out of this and trying to rail at scale, right? Trying to understand what does it actually mean? How do you translate all these metrics into feature requests or into just grungy performance work? And the interesting thing here is that as we discover more about Rail, we realize that Rail is just not the whole thing. There's lots of other metrics there that are also really valuable. Metrics related not just to performance, but also to efficiency, right? Metrics related to things like memory. You probably shouldn't be consuming a lot of memory on a resource-constrained device. And if you're running my lab, I'm not going to like you, right? Because you're also eating my battery. There's also constraints related to emerging markets where the connection speeds are just, well, let's just say they're not there. And so there's some extreme challenges where Rail is like just infeasible. So we might have to think about what does it mean to Rail in over 2G, right? Like, this is hard. And even if it's not just emerging markets, when I go in a tunnel or basically go to San Francisco, my awesome LTE thing is really not awesome a lot of times. And like I had amazing failure scenario where some guiding map application failed me like at the last mile, and I was like, oh great, now I don't know what to do. And we need to figure out how to tackle those things. And the web has never been extremely good at it, but I think we have all the right pieces now. We just need to learn how to put them together. And there's lots of other things, and I'm just going to list a few that are like still part of the, something you would, consider a part of the good user experience and something we could potentially build metrics. So, gonna be bombastic here and say, we need something better than Rail. We need the Rail++. Or maybe, something that's called user happiness. And by the way, this slide was specifically optimized for you to look at and feel happy. So if I leave it here for an hour, you will all be completely chill by the end of the thing. Don't you think? So we need something like this. And it's what you would call emphasis. Something! No, can you do the echo now? Anyway, and we're also kind of toying around with this term of progressive web apps, and Alex Russell wrote a blog about this, and kind of catchy new term, and it sort of like creates this watershed delineation between like, here was the before service worker and all of the performance work and all the insights that we learned about the web development, and here's the after, and here's how you build. Can you hear me okay? I can, okay. And here's the after. And this after changes dramatically in how you develop web applications. And so maybe this thing, the metrics that we're doing, need to also align with that so that both us and developers have a clearer picture of whether you're doing the right thing ahead of time. And this is all very fluid. I'm intentionally I put a lot of question marks in a lot of places. And question mark here as well, because I don't know what progressive web apps actually means. We're still working on this. This is the beautiful part about complex problems. They're fluid and they change, and the definitions adjust. And when we talked about BlinkOn on the Rail, it wasn't even called Rail back then, right? It was called Midnight Train or whatever that thing was. And we didn't quite know what it was. And so this is, the most important thing is that if we have these metrics, if we continue trying to be focused on data, focused on performance insights, focused on how to convert user happiness into some sort of metrics, we can now take and move the entire web toward that. That's no big deal, right? Simple. So how do we do this? What is the way we're going to accomplish this? What is our way? And our primary audience and our primary lever in this lever? I don't know. In this whole game is web developers. This is who we write the code for, and this is who takes our code and turns it into amazing experience or really not amazing experiences. So it's really our goal is to take developers and help them move the web toward that. And before we do that, we kind of need to stop and say, hey, Rick talked about this a lot, but let me summarize this. And what are the primary challenges? What are the kind of the 4 big things? I really like everything to be or top 3 or top 4. You know, so what are the 4 big things that web developers are facing as an obstacle? I would say number 1 is our fault. We're not so good, right? We still have plenty of stuff that we do really way too much work, or we do it not as efficiently as we should. We forget the bugs, like with artillery. We let them rot, or let the P2 bugs get starved into, you know, code yellows. If you are not a Googler, I'm not sure you're familiar with the term of code yellow, and that is basically a firefight. At some point, you've accumulated enough small problems that they've all ganged up on you into one large problem, and now you're stuck. And now you have to go fix that. But this is also not just Blink and Chromium and Opera and Intel and Samsung contributing to the code. This is also other browsers, because we still have lots of work to do to make sure that developer confidence that Rick talked about is there. And developer confidence starts with, if I use this API, this stuff will happen. And if it doesn't, well, that's failure 1. But if it does in one browser and doesn't in the other, then that's probably even a worse of a problem, right? Because then you're like, what do I do now? And so we have to understand that this is a huge challenge for us, and we really need to get really good at seeing ourselves and recognizing how much of this is our fault. But at the same time, there is also things that the platform itself simply doesn't have yet. There's features and capabilities that need to be invented or need to be shipped in order to provide a good user experience. One of the things was Service Worker that shipped last year, this year? When was it shipped? January, this year, made it. Okay, and it really kind of turned the whole discussion into a whole different conversation. It changed the whole landscape of how you build a web app. Now you can have a thing that runs on demand, behind the scenes, and you can control your network, and you basically don't have to worry about how resilient your connection is. Oh, you have to worry about it, but you can now do something about this. And the other one is I want to point out is Intersection Observer, which is the work that's still happening now. When we started looking, when Rick pointed out, at these tracing of different sites, one of the things we discovered is, turns out a lot of computation is spent trying to just figure out, am I on screen? Am I visible? And it's like one of those things where as a Blink developer will go, oh, just do this, it's very simple. And like then you actually say, no, sit with the actual developer and see what they actually need. Turns out there's no easy way of doing this. And the only way of doing this is terrible, terrible hackery that is very inefficient and slow. And so we need a primitive to solve this problem, and we need to work on this. And this is the work that's happening right now. And at the same time, one of the things that we traditionally have been accused of, and it's true, it's not really accusation, is that web platform progress is very slow. It moves very slowly. And so if you rush it too much, you end up with less developer confidence. It ships here, it doesn't ship here, what the hell? If you go too slow, then nothing happens. Let's debate 3 more years about the edge cases of Flexbox layout. Let's figure that out. And so we have to figure out a balance there. And one of the interesting things that's happening in this here is experimental framework, which I think there is a talk. Is there a talk on experimental framework?
Yes.
Yes. And so that's, I love the enthusiasm. Mostly provided by me, but that's okay. And the third problem, I think, is that even if you have all the right pieces, and even if all of our things that we do poorly are fixed, it's still too hard. And I know there are people who spent a lot of time, engineers on this group, spend a lot of time stressing over deprecating features. And the reason why you deprecate features is because you don't want to leave the paths that you don't want the developer to travel. And you don't want them to accidentally go and say, hey, this looks nice. And then it's a terrible thing because this is not the thing that you wanted them to use. And there is really not a good sort of like a manual for the web, right? There's not a good like, oh, just do these 3 things, follow these 9 steps or 25 steps. Hey, even 100 steps, I'll be okay with that, right? The confidence in the next action for the developer, I'm here. Next step I'm going to take is this. It's still too hard. It's still very difficult. Should I use this framework or should I use raw JavaScript? I mean, should I use this API? Is offset width okay here? I don't know. So how do we do this? And how do we fix this? That's a hard problem. Even though it is, this one is the harder. The 4th problem, I think, is the much more difficult because we can't do anything about it directly. I mean, it would be great if we just all converted into web developers and went and fixed all of the old sites. That's probably going to work, right? Scale type of thing? No? No. The web is large. The massive scale of what we have is so large that we can't influence it very quickly. It's a very slow, very high inertia. It's a Titanic. Hopefully not going for the iceberg. That's what I'm hoping to avoid this time. Bad analogy. We'll think of a bigger ship next time. No. And the other one is there's like the misaligned incentives. We have struggled very early on with the web idea that composition is the king. You can just take a snippet of code and put it here, and it works. How does it work? Like, honestly, sometimes I wonder how it works. Like, somebody just throws copy-paste code in, and it's like, whoa, I just can't believe it loads at all. But it does. We're awesome. In fact, I think we should be celebrating our success that we've really solved the composition problem, right? I mean, you look at this Verge, and it says, yes, it loads slowly. But look at how much stuff it does. It's amazing. If you kind of look at the amount of computation energy goes into this, it's like, holy crap, we have an amazing platform. What did we forget about? We forget about the coordination problem. Turns out, if you don't have a budget in mind, composition is easy. You will just compose yourself into infinity, and you will build yourself things that are so huge and humongous and very difficult to reason about that the next step for you to solve any of these problems is to give up and say, you know, screw this, flip table and emoji, and go build some other thing or build from scratch. In fact, this was or used to be and still is one of the primary ways developers build websites. New website is we'll do everything from scratch because this time we'll get it right. So now that I've outlined those 4 problems, it seems like our job is very simple, right? We just go pew, 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 pew. Did you like that? Was that good? Just make those go away and we're done, right? How do we do it? How do we get those 4 things out of developers' way? Well, first of all, I have to disappoint you first. We are probably not going to fix it in 2016. It's probably a multi-year type of thing. Maybe in 2017. I hope, right? No? Yeah. Okay. I think the prerequisite to everything, our power, is making sure that we are able to measure our progress. And that measurements we're taking are actually leading toward the progress. And I think performance insights, again, please attend that talk, it's really important, is attempting to solve this problem at scale and saying, look, we know we need to move the bar over there. It seems to work. There's lots of decisions and thinking went into this. But how do we do this at scale? And I think same thing needs to happen with understanding emerging markets, understanding power, understanding battery. And that's the first step. We have to do this. We have to learn. And in fact, every problem we solve, let's first ask the question, how do you convert a nebulous problem into a specific metric or something, some measure of user happiness? and not turn this metric into, oh, score 40,000 and 300 and 500 on this benchmark. That is nonsense. How does it help users, right? How does it convert into user happiness? This is a hard problem, and I'm glad that we have top brains on the team working on this. And if you want to be one of those top brains, please attend the session, raise your hand, talk about this. This is exciting stuff. Probably the majority of the investment in 2016, I think, at least I hope, we need to spend on making sure our stuff is good. And just get our stuff together. I keep using stuff because I usually use the other word, but I'm going to be taped. And just get our things go fast and don't do dumb things. This also includes interop and compat work, which means standards. I can't emphasize enough that we do have active participants and collaborators in other browser vendors. And we need to take care of that. And we need to make sure that the venue is open, everybody's listening. This is a good time to do these types of things. And there are probably lots of bugs that we need to look and say, we all do this differently. Let's figure out one way that is right. And let's make sure that the developer, next time they encounter this situation or use this API, they don't have to worry that this will work differently in another browser. And I think I bolded it out and put it in a separate thing, is one of the interesting feedback items that developers, the relations people give us, is that CR bug is just like a silent thing, the chamber where bugs go to die. Let's prove it in 2016 that we'll listen to developers in CR bug. Yes?
Yes.
Yes. I like it. Like, there you go. Definitely need to continue work on supplying the missing parts. Lots of things are in flight already, lots of interesting idea. I want to highlight experimental framework again, and Houdini work, which again, there is a talk, please attend that, about trying to understand what are the missing parts. I'm hoping soon we will get to the point where we go like, you know, we got it mostly. But I don't think that's the case, so I don't know at least. So let's continue our pursuit of the later platform and realize that some of the features that we need to ship are not going to be layered because, or at least they're not going to feel like they're layered, that we still will build them on the layered platform. But we need to build also the easy-to-use knobs for developers who don't want to build up entire framework on top of a very low-level primitive. And there's like what I call the pit of success primitives. Cover 80% case, it's good enough. And then provide the primitives and explain the entire stack so that a more advanced developer can cover the remaining 20. That's the important part. A new item on this list from last year, I think I talked about the first two on BlinkOn too, is close the feedback loop. The diagram that Rick had about search, site, analytics browser, and then there was like maybe a user there somewhere as well. This was super important. I think we really need to learn this year how to communicate to developer about user happiness and how to tell them ahead of time and after the fact that the user is not happy or the user is happy. And this is a huge problem. This is a huge challenge for us to understand how to do this carefully without destroying the ecosystem. Because one of the interesting notions there is user agent interventions, which is like the browser basically goes and says, you know what, you were wrong, and I'm going to fix it for you. And when we say that to developer too much, developer just goes, you know what, screw you. I'm not going to do that. So it's a very difficult situation, and need to understand the challenge there. The most important part is, this one is very exciting slide, is that the legacy part, we might actually be able to move the needle there with the after deployment interventions. For sites that are too slow, content that's dead, things that are not in active development, we might be able to fix them somehow. I don't know. I'm holding hope. So come to my talk on user agent interventions. Let's talk about that and brainstorm and discuss passionately. And you know, I think we have a really exciting year in 2016. Don't screw it up. This is going to be super important. But I think we have a good plan. Plain old perf work, missing parts, missing manual, and the remaining bits. And want to announce that there's going to be BlinkOn 6 maybe. Somewhere in Europe, you may not recognize the building where it is, so we're not going to say where it is. And we're not going to say when, but it's going to be in 2016 in spring. All right, do we have any time for questions and comments? Yeah?
At least 5 minutes.
Is there mics that we can hand out? By the way, have you seen the cool thing that I have? I'm Madonna. I'm seriously. This is really important stuff.
One other quick announcement. Test, test, test. Doesn't work?
Oh.
Okay, here we go. One other quick announcement. If you didn't see the email to BlinkDev, there's BlinkOn 5 IRC channel on Freenode where we're coordinating social activities and that sort of thing. So make sure you join. Questions? Discussion? Flame? I mean, obviously a lot of this was our opinion. It's not gospel.
It's not.
Maybe your part.
No.
Wow, it looks like everybody agrees.
It's awesome. Or asleep. Best two outcomes.
Elliot.
I just wanted Rick to run over here. You keep telling us not to screw up, which no pressure or anything, but what do you think that we need to do to not screw up? Like, what are the things that we should do next year to make sure that we don't screw up?
I think the key thing is that, number one, the excellence and focus on product and focusing on developers and making sure we're not letting them down. Because the worst thing that could potentially happen is that we build amazing things, they don't quite fit together. When developers come go try them, they get disappointed. And a disappointed developer means a chance missed to improve the ecosystem. And so I think this is the top thing, is make sure stuff that you do is excellent. It works great, and it fits with the rest of the picture, and developer can actually use it for something that changes their user happiness or something like that.
Thank you.
You mentioned a lot about the importance of moving the web platform forward and also interoperability. So what do we do about Safari?
Do you want to answer that? We have Alex Russell in the house. Yay!
So I drew the short straw earlier this year, and I now am one of the tech leads for the Chrome team's standards work. And so this is top of mind for me every day. And so the short answer for this room is that you should continue to lead, right? We should lead the right way. We should lead thoughtfully. We should lead in an open and collaborative way. We should always be willing to take a meeting or a call or get on a flight to go meet with our partners wherever they are and build open standards. We should never just rush ahead on our own, just do our own thing. That's never how we should go. But we should be fearless in paying attention to our end developers' needs and addressing them. And if that means being out ahead and taking some risks and putting our neck on the line, yes, that's the right thing to do. So what we do about Safari is we make websites amazing, and then they can't not implement.
Alex Russell, everybody. All right. 2 questions, 3 questions, or what? One more? Oh, okay, Philip.
Yes. So number 4, legacy. There was something called rum there. What's that?
Oh, it's a drink. No.
That help?
No, but it will make you feel better. It's real user metrics. It's the idea that you need to, as well as measuring performance yourself, give the APIs to developers to be able to capture the metrics back and see if they're doing OK, and encourage the culture of
performance timeline kind of thing.
Type of thing, yes.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Thank you.